Hi, and welcome back to the Vixen Voice. As you know, I'm excited every time I'm talking to you. Today, I am especially excited. I love our panel discussions. The reason I love them is everyone who has participated is someone I know and love. And so for me, it's really beautiful to see them interact and get to know each other, and for you, our audience, to hear them. And today's especially special because my niece, Julia Roberts Vanderlei, is here with us. So we're going to get to chat with her. And so all of these women hold a very special place in my heart. I'd like to welcome Marilyn Prebul, and she is the founder of Soul Support Coaching. So you guys know, you've heard me mention that I am training for spiritual healing, and Marilyn also, she's quite advanced as for me, but she is a fellow healer. So I'm super excited to have her here with me today. And Sylvia Worsham, who is an author and a turning points coach. You have heard from her already on an interview here, and she's amazing, and she's in my Vixen Mastermind. And as Sylvia can tell you, at our last retreat, we got to know each other very well. You know, when you get to that point where inappropriate stuff starts coming out, well, we are there in the Vixen Mastermind. So we had a blast at the last retreat. We're sharing our goals and our dreams, and it's really amazing. And then finally, it's my honor to welcome Julia Roberts Vanderlei, who is officially the first family member to be on the Vixen Voice. And Julia is the Chief Marketing Officer at Roberts Wealth Management, run by her father, my brother, and they actually merged with my former financial firm. So Julia has had her hands full merging from Florida to Texas and keeping all of these clients happy for the past year. So we're going to kind of dig in. Today, I love what we're talking about because this is probably my favorite topic in the Vixen gathering, and it's self-love. And if you've heard me talk before, you know that I really believe we're all here on earth for a certain purpose, and that when we're truly being who we are and showing up as we are fulfilling that purpose. And it's hard because we have other people we love. We have our significant others, we have our family, we have our clients, we have our team, but we are not here on their mission. We are here on our special mission. And so I think it's so important to cultivate our self-love. I also feel there is spiritual warfare against us loving ourselves. So it's so important that we have this conversation and break down those barriers. And a big part of that is setting graceful boundaries. So that's why we're talking about it today. And I think for we women, you know, boundaries is kind of a word like taxes. No one really likes to talk about it, but it's necessary, right? And you've probably heard me say before, I think setting boundaries is kind of like a toddler learning how to walk. You're going to fall down. You're not going to do it perfectly. But if you don't keep getting back up, that's not going to be a great life, right? So if you haven't heard, go listen to my solo episode on boundaries. I give you a framework for setting graceful boundaries and also reflecting on them afterwards, because I feel a lot of us hesitate from it because we feel icky afterwards. So what we want to do is be very intentional about the boundaries, set the boundary, reflect, and feel good about it afterward. And to me, that's a graceful boundary, because if I'm setting a boundary with you, it means I want to keep you in my life, because let's be honest, in today's world, if I didn't, I would just ghost you, right? So today we're going to talk about self-love, which I think is our most important relationship. And we're going to talk about setting boundaries to protect that self-love and really as a form of love to those around us. So I'd love to kind of just dig in. Self-love came into my purvey in last year at some point. And at the time I was dating someone, we were both in strategic coach. Marilyn's very familiar with strategic coach. And we were listening to a power up session. And the coach asked us, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself as a good person? So I'm going to share my story, but I'd love to start there. So Marilyn, you've probably heard this before, but on a scale of 1 to 10, we get vulnerable and real here on the Vixen Voice. I'm going to warn you. How would you rate yourself as a good person?
I would rate myself as a 9 on 10. And I leave that margin because I like to think of myself as a good person, but I'm always learning and growing and seeing and open to opportunities for becoming more compassionate, more loving, more forgiving as I am growing in my own self-love. I think that there isn't a destination point there. I believe that it's an ongoing process. So that's where I'm at. However, in the past, I might have rated myself a little bit lower on
Love
that.
it.
So yeah.
No, and I want to talk to you about that because, I want to hear, I'd love to hear from Sylvia and Julia first, but Brendan Bouchard, as I was getting certified in life coaching from him, high performance coaching, he talked about how being a coach, he felt made him a better person. And I totally agree because you start understanding where people are coming from. But I think becoming a spiritual healer even raises that a notch, right? So it's really interesting because we can't do what we do if we don't practice unconditional love and compassion. So it's like constantly having to flex those muscles and really focus on it. So Sylvia, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself?
I'm kind of between an 8 and a 9. And those were the
Uh-huh.
numbers that came to me as you asked the question. And much like Marilyn, I mean, self-love was a fairly new concept for me. I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
understand it till 2020 and during the pandemic, and I wrote the first book. And that's where it really hit me. Like, this is a very new concept for me. I grew up in a Mexican culture, and that was not a very well thought out or talked about subject. In fact, it was
Mm-hmm.
construed as self-centered. And so to be a good person, if you don't love yourself, you don't raise your vibration and raise your standards if you don't first love yourself. And for a long
Yeah.
time, much like Marilyn, I would have rated myself lower because of where I saw the rating in self-love.
Yeah, I love that. And, my great grandmother always said, if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone. And a lot of times as we get older, we think back to what our grandparents and great grandparents said and how wise they were. Because I always like to say, if we're not taking care of ourselves and loving ourselves, yes, we can give, but we're not giving from a full cup, right? So it's so much more powerful when it comes from a place of love, which is why I feel this is so important as well. So, Julia, on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm just going to point out Julia's a little bit younger than us, right? We're usually Gen X women on this podcast. Julia's in her 20s still. So, I'd love to hear your answer.
Well, on a number scale, I definitely agreed with Sylvia. I was thinking the same thing of between an 8 and a 9.
Yeah.
And I feel like the two-part answer to that, it really ties into today's episode. On the self-love side of it, I feel like perfectionism and pushing yourself, there's kind of that fine line of what is trying to be perfect and what is just pushing yourself to be better. So that results in you like constantly questioning everything you do and if you do it
Mm-hmm.
correctly or if you do it right. And then on the other side of things, boundaries wise, it's almost as if when you learn to try to set those boundaries for yourself and ultimately for the people that you love, and you haven't for so long, you tend to feel selfish and wrong. So that's kind of where my 8 to 9 falls because
I
of those
love
two
it.
reasons.
So a couple of things, and then I'm curious. When y'all were all 18, would you have rated yourself on self love?
Oh,
Oh, for me, oh gosh, I would say a 2. I was a 2.
Really?
I have come
Wow.
across photos. I did the Marie Kondo method a few years back, and I
Uh
came
huh.
across photos of myself at that age. And where everyone was smiling, I literally had a frown on my
Oh no.
face. And if you were to talk to some of my friends from high school, they would remember me as being very angry. And
Hmm.
I was angry, I was sad. I was definitely, in that Gen X, grunge, goth
Yeah. I
phase in my
remember.
when I was 18. So no, I had really no concept of self-love at that age.
Wow, thank you for sharing that because, I want to hear from everyone. But gosh, you're just such a loving, peaceful, like amazing person that it's crazy to imagine. I'd love to see a picture of 18-year-old Marilyn. Just we need to like see the difference, right? So, Sylvia, I saw you struggling with this or laughing about this question as well. So, where would you have rated yourself at 18?
If there's a negative number that we can quote, that's where I would
Oh
stand.
my
Oh,
gosh.
Like Marilyn, I was
I
very
know it
angry
hurts my heart.
in high school because I was bullied. I was bullied extensively, and I believed myself not to be beautiful enough, not smart enough, not enough. And so I
Yeah.
pushed myself out of that environment and circumstance through perfection and high achievement to make myself feel better. But I did that for so long that I burned myself out. So I would have to say, like, oh, I don't know, negative, right before one. That's where I would rate myself. It was bad.
oh,
It was a bad time in my life, and I'm just so blessed to be in a different state today. And I have just so
Yeah.
much wisdom to share with women that perhaps could find themselves there now in their young 18, 19, 20 years old, that where they can really, they have a great opportunity to shift their thoughts on the matter and start doing some of the personal growth that I discovered in my late 30s.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting. This is fascinating. This was off the cuff. So, Julia, how would you have rated yourself at age 18?
It's kind of a hard answer because I feel like what I consider a 1 and a 10 now was completely different of what I considered a 1 and a 10 at 18.
Agreed.
Um, I think my core qualities and personality trait, through any of the struggles that I had at that time, always kind of shine through, always kind of still made me ultimately at the core a good person. So I guess I would give myself maybe like a 7 for the thought of, also I was a teenager doing teenager things and not as worried about the people that surrounded me and gullible to the world. So I couldn't go any higher than a 7, I'd say.
That's so funny. So I love this conversation because last year, it was February of 2022 when I started my daily self love, self forgiveness practice that then led me into the healing world. And, I've worked with a spiritual healer since 2019. So he had introduced it to me. And so I think it was like, I want to say March or April. So I was just barely into this journey when that incident happened that I shared with y'all. And I immediately rated myself a 7, and my partner rated himself a 10. And I totally agreed with him. He's a 10. And he was like, "Why are you a 7?" And he explained, "I don't think I'm perfect, but I always try and I really like myself." And I was just like, wow, I have some work to do. Because I didn't really think anything bad of myself, but I think I almost rated myself a 7 because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like you shouldn't be a 10. And so, that really spurred me to continue on this like self love journey. Meaning, if I'm a 10, it doesn't mean I'm perfect. Life changes, right? But it just means I'm doing the best I can do at this point in time. So, the interesting thing is at 18, I probably would have rated myself a 10. So, and I love talking to women about this because we all had different, experiences. Because I look at my 18-year-old self all the time like, oh my gosh, she was smart, she was courageous, like she was super sweet. Like, I mean, it's almost the epitome of who I want to be now, right? Before all these layers and socialization and responsibility got dumped on me. But I had a very blessed childhood, so I think a lot of it comes from there. And in my household, we were really taught to love ourselves and to take care of ourselves. And so I think, that's why I think coaching and healing makes you a better person, because you meet your clients where they're at, right? People that come into your lives. And I wish in the world we could all behave like that more. Like, let's get rid of the judgment and everybody's had a different journey. So anyway, thank you for sharing that with me. I really found that interesting. What I would like to ask you next is a tough question, but I just wrote about this in our blog. So, what do you feel if you could think of something in your life that was your greatest act of self-love, what would you say it is? Sylvia, it looks like you know.
I know because I know precisely when the concept of self-love really hit me, and that was when my
Awesome.
relationship with God strengthened immensely. And it went from
Yeah.
believing in him to trusting in him and surrendering to him. And the act of surrender through obedience and writing my first book, Journey to Me, which was a very vulnerable share,
Yeah.
was the the act that really sealed the definition of self-love for me, and that is to love myself the
Hmm.
way that God loves me and to see myself the way he sees me and act from that space. And until people reach that level, then you can start leveling up. But before then, I think
Yeah.
that concept is kind of just hanging in the air and people don't really grasp it as well. But for me,
Hmm.
that was what really sealed it.
I love it. Thank you for going first and sharing. All
That's
right. So,
beautiful.
Marilyn or Julia, does something come to your mind?
Yeah.
Y-
For me, I would say it's probably when I graduated college, transitioning into dependency to independency and what I like to call the quarter life crisis. It actually was a good thing.
Hmm.
Not that it's easy, but I think that I started to recognize certain traits and
Hmm.
actions about myself that I never had before, and having to do things on my own, and of course just learning every day about life in general. I just started to be more aware of the
Hmm.
qualities and that I possessed and things about myself that I really appreciated, that I was happy that I was that way. So I think that that really pivotal transitional phase of my life was when I started to give myself a little bit more recognition.
I love it. I love that you're so young and so self-aware of this concept, right? Like you're actually leaning into it instead of away from it, which most of us did as we got older, we went away from self-love. At least that was my experience, right? And I love y'all sharing this because I always say, like every woman I interact with, my goal is to help her become her biggest cheerleader. I think if we're all our
Yeah.
biggest cheerleaders, like, if you see a woman in love, it's one of the most beautiful things you're ever going to see, right? So imagine if all we women were walking around in love with ourselves and in love with each other. Like, I mean, this is how the world evolves, right? Like, feminine energy is really what's going to push us through. So I think it's so important for we women. And there's been an attack on us having self love from wherever it's been directed. And so, if you're listening and you have a friend that needs a little reminder, tell them how much you love them. I tell my friends and family all the time that I love them. Like, tell them you
She
love them,
does.
help them love, help them love themselves, right? And let's just spread that message. So, Marilyn, how about you? Do you have a greatest act of self love?
Yes, I do. And I want to acknowledge Julia in her at
Yeah.
her age to have this awareness is so beautiful. And
Thank you.
I'm looking at this. My experience of self love has been that I've grown in self love as I've
I love it.
become older, right? And recently, just this year, actually, in my most recent healer training, I had
Yeah.
this great insight and it's very much like what Sylvia said, that I really embraced that God is within me. God is within each of us. We are all
Mhm.
part of that light, our spirit, our soul. We all emanate from that light, and there's a oneness and there's a being. And that is that love, that unconditional love that is beyond, that can never be destroyed. We will move on, and that is what remains. That is the truth of who we are. And to deny ourself, my big awakening is that denying
Yeah.
self love in any way is to deny God. And
Yes.
to deny God's love. So to love yourself, to really love yourself, is to love God. And a way, an action of doing that is to fully forgive yourself and to forgive everyone who has hurt you from the day you were born. So I feel that, this is something I have been working on with my family, and generationally, I've had a lot of that karma to carry and work through. And being able to really, really forgive myself and love myself and accept myself for everything in this life and in any past lifetime karma that has come up, and come to peace with that is the greatest act of self-love for me, because there's nothing there anymore that's showing up as a block. And it's a practice I do every single day, is getting down on my knees and thanking God and asking for forgiveness, and really contemplating on how much God loves me and forgives me, has so much mercy and compassion that I can give that to myself, and I have the gift to give that to others as well. So this has been the big breakthrough for me just this year. And there are other stories in the past, but I would say that really, it left me in tears that day, when I really felt that awareness come into me. And, the practice of forgiveness every single day has been really breakthrough.
I agree. And I feel, if we are God's greatest creation, which we are, and we don't love ourselves, what does that say to God, right? Like, even if you want to look at it from a third party's perspective. And so, yeah, I am with you. So, Marilyn, I should be right there with you with the greatest act of self-love, because I think I was at that workshop with you, but it was beautiful and amazing. But my greatest act of self-love actually came under duress, and it was when I had to leave my ex-husband, because I had gone with him to clean up his cocaine addiction we'd gone through two rehabs, and the third one like almost mentally, physically, and emotionally broke me. I mean, if you know me, like, nothing suicidal has ever crept into my brain. And I remember I almost got hit by a bus in Milan we were living, and I thought, oh, it wouldn't have been that bad. And that jolted me out of where I was. And I was like, I have to save myself. I was so busy trying to save him that I was lost. And so, that was the most difficult thing I did in my life, because we were very much in love, and leaving someone you're in love with because, it's literally killing you is very difficult. So I like to share that story because a lot of people deal with addiction and we don't talk about it enough in our society. And it's so painful and hard. You can see me getting emotional even 15 years later, that I just think it's important. And, I wish it were more heroic, something I did, but I literally had to save myself. And I think that's when I understood, every relationship since then, I have not sacrificed myself to the relationship, if that makes sense, or, whatever it be. So for me, that was, I think, my greatest act of self-love. And I share it because sometimes we don't choose it, right? It's forced upon us, and it's part of our journey. So
I think that you said it wasn't heroic, but I think that it is. I mean, you took a really bad, hard, traumatizing, heart-wrenching experience and turned it into this right now, this conversation that will impact people, and especially yourself. So I think it is a heroic thing.
Yeah, and that's part of what I love about the Vixen gathering. We have to love people where they are because, I was that broken woman. And Sylvia, you've shared your story. You were there. And Marilyn, you're sharing how you were angry. And, people can look at us now and say, like, oh my gosh, you're so happy all the time. But, that wasn't always the case. And I think it's
No.
important to share that because the purpose of the Vixen Voice is to give a voice to women, to let them know they're not alone, and to inspire them, to do great things in business or just do great things in life. Like show up who you truly are. So thank you, Julia. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Awesome. Well, self love is my favorite topic, but we have to talk about boundaries because this one's a tough one, right? So here's my first question because I had this aha years ago in that I would take all this risk in business, but I wasn't taking the same amount of risk in my personal life, right? So I tried to learn the lessons from the risk I took in business to apply to my personal life. I realized I was being too safe in my personal life. And I like to think of boundaries like that. Like I felt I was really good at setting boundaries at work. I had to kind of, being the boss. But in my personal life, I was terrible at it. And I think Marilyn was working with the same healer. And literally since 2019, I've been on this journey to learn boundaries. And he was a big part of teaching me boundaries and enhancing self love, right? And so, I feel I'm, much better on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd probably rate myself like an 8.5 in setting boundaries. I might be better than that because I tend to download. And I say that because I now can do it and not feel guilty afterward, right? Like I know it's
That's
coming from a
key.
healthy place. I know it's good for all of us because so many of us will set the boundary in a reactive mode. And then maybe we don't feel badly about setting the boundary, but we can feel badly about the way we did it. So again, if you haven't listened in, my solo episode about boundaries, I coach you through like preparing for the difficult conversation, having it and reflecting on it afterwards so you can feel good about it. So please go listen. But I'd love to hear from you ladies. Do you feel at this point in time, are you better at work or in personal life setting boundaries? By the way, it's flipped because I love my team and we have a startup. So I feel like I'm worse setting boundaries with my team now than I am in my personal life. So remember, we're not perfect. We have seasons. But would you say that you're better in your personal life or professional setting boundaries?
For me, I would say I'm better at my personal life because, if you think about it, the people that you work with, you spend more time with them than you do the people you spend at home with, your family, whether it's your husband, mother, father, sister, whoever. So I have found myself to also naturally be more comfortable with family or close friends, in my personal life, and might be a little bit more comfortable to set that boundary or say what I need to say versus people that I work with.
Yeah. So I forgot to ask y'all before we started if anything was off bounds. So you can refuse to answer any questions because I didn't. But Julia, you work and live with your husband. So
I
do
do.
you set the same boundaries at work as home? Like, do you find that you operate differently with him in your personal versus professional life?
Yeah, a little bit. For one, we leave work at work. We have a rule of we go home 15 minutes. We, just like any other couple, how was your day? Talk about it, things like that. But then it's like, all right, now let's turn that off and let's switch modes back to being husband and wife instead of coworkers. With the boundary sense, I would say that the level of intensity, I guess you could say, with the boundaries, I would say are the same. When it comes to work, I'm a little bit more serious, a little bit more, direct and results oriented. So it probably could come off not as nice or not as productive as it could at home. But I would say, they're pretty much the same, but I don't know, that's a tough
That's
one.
okay. I know.
That's what I'm
Well,
still learning. That's what we're still learning for sure.
Well, as I'm sure Marilyn can share with you, because she's probably had many clients who have with their significant others. Like, it's definitely a challenge. Like, working with
Yes.
family, working with significant others, it's a whole nother set. So I think you guys do phenomenally well from what I see. So, but you had examples of other family members working together. So what are you set? You're like third generation learning this. So
Yes.
you get to learn.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you get all of our bad karma, but you also learn from our tuition, right?
Well, and it's unique because I experienced each phase of life. So from childhood, I saw what it's like family working together, teenage, adult years, just different perspectives. So it's very interesting. And of course, there's pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses to anything that you do.
Yeah, but I think it's one of the most challenging places to set boundaries. So thanks for chatting with us about
Absolutely.
that. So Sylvia and Marilyn, where do you feel you're stronger, personal or professional?
I
think
I
for me
think
it's a
for
toss-up.
me, it's
That's okay.
it's
Marilyn, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, it's been easier in the professional setting. The boundaries have been more difficult in the personal setting, particularly in relationships. When I reflect on the past dating, I've been married and divorced and then dating. And the relationships that I seem to have, or the people that I seem to attract, or in the past, there was that boundary with being a healer and being compassionate and understanding and loving. And then there was, this isn't really acceptable in a relationship type of behavior. And it's not, there's a big distinction between when you are a healing client and I'm helping you work through those issues or those blocks and transform that versus we are considering being in a relationship. And this is just not, I can be your healer. And I've actually had that happen where a couple of the people I've dated in the past, I have done some healing work and it's beautiful. And that was the intention, or that was the correct relationship with that person. So that's been difficult. And then with family, I find it's been a journey of setting healthy boundaries for myself energetically, where yes, it's really important to have the forgiveness and unconditional love. And again, there are certain behaviors that are not acceptable. And I wouldn't let anyone else, behave that way towards me. So being able to draw the line there has been a big area of growth for me as
Yeah,
well.
and I love that point because always when I'm coaching on boundaries or helping someone set a framework, I try to be very clear. Like, I'm not a therapist. I don't know how to deal with narcissists and sociopaths. But in my experience, if you set a healthy boundary and you give them X number of friendly reminders, right, and they keep just obliterating it, then you're probably dealing with something on a higher level. Like most human beings are going to respect your boundary at some point. We as humans have to be reminded of things, right? But if someone's constantly obliterating your boundaries, then something's wrong. There's a deeper problem or they have a deeper problem. So thank you for bringing that up. And I would agree with that balance of like unconditional love. I've realized recently, like, I went to Houston before going to our Vixen mastermind. And then tonight I'm flying to LA for a day. And then I'm going to Europe Monday. And like, I kind of got guilted by my family to go to Houston a day early to spend time with them, which I know and I got to spend the day in the pool with my younger nieces and nephews. And it was beautiful. But that extra day really just depleted me to a level that I have to learn to say, no, because I recently moved away. So, I get a lot of guilt. Are you going to be here for Halloween? Are you going to be here for Christmas? And it's little kids, and that's hard. Like the boundaries with the little kids is hard for me.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah, it's a constant battle. I would say I'm normally very good at protecting my energy, but I just learned a lesson. I was like, I had too much going on for just that one extra day, right? So Sylvia, where do you think that you set better boundaries, professionally or personally?
I think it's both is a toss up and they're pretty even, and I'll explain why. I had an example to share when I was writing Journey. I did a bartering agreement with a writing coach. She would be doing the editing work on it, and I would personally coach her. And so it was an agreement like that. And I fulfilled my end of the deal, and she was lagging behind. So on that professional
Wow.
front, I had to sit back and say, hey, I'm not going to continue coaching you until you edit X, Y, and Z, this many chapters. And she was a little taken aback. And I said, because this is the agreement between you and I. And we were friends. So it's a personal and a professional boundary to a degree, but it was a bartering agreement. And I had upheld my end of the bargain and she hadn't. And so
Yeah.
as my self love grew in me in 2020, so did my
Hmm.
boundaries. They grew at the same rate as my self love. And I found that I was at first uncomfortable setting those boundaries because I didn't have that confidence in myself and I didn't believe myself to be enough. But the more I believed I was
Hmm.
enough, the more I stepped into it a little bit firmer and pushed past
Hmm.
that deception that my mind wanted to throw at me and say, no, no, stay there. You want to be the pleaser. You want to keep, everybody happy. But ultimately I wasn't happy and then I wasn't producing in my life. And then I wasn't the good
Yeah.
human being I could be. Right. So it was like this constant self sabotage. And so right now I've learned, because I practice self love and self care daily, I have learned
Hmm.
to uh, set those boundaries in a very loving way from a space of love. And
Yeah.
just, for example, with my husband, if there's something that he's doing that is hurting me, I will very calmly say, I can't deny my feelings were hurt when this action transpired, and this is really what I need
Yeah.
from you. And so it's my way of like saying, I love you and I want to keep you in my life, and I don't want us to divorce. So please,
Right.
fulfill this need for me, and this is why. But that's it goes back and forth between professional and personal.
Yeah. And I love that, and I that's why I always, when I coach on it, I always recommend coming from a place of love in that conversation. So this is a funny story I had. I was invited to a mastermind of realtors to talk to them about setting boundaries, right? Because they'd been super busy and then it was slowing down, and so they invited me to like help them get work life balance again, which doesn't really exist, by the way, right? It's just how present are you at this moment. And so I'm talking to a group of realtors about boundaries, which was interesting because they feel they have to answer the phone 24/7 or they're not going to make money, number one. And number two, I mean, this happened when I was selling my house. A realtor on the other side didn't like that we didn't take their offer, and he was screaming at my realtor. And I
Ooh.
just can't think of many instances where this would be acceptable, but this happens quite a bit in the real estate world from what I've experienced with friends and people I know and my own realtor. And so they were like, well, what if someone's yelling at me on the phone? And I was like, look, you go high, like you come from love, right? And if they go here, you stay here. So they should start coming towards you. If they don't, you excuse yourself from the conversation and rejoin. And they're like horrified. So we walked through a situation and they were like, wow, I think that would work. So I just don't really, there aren't many situations that this won't work. I was watching Jordan Peterson the other night. He thinks that 3% of the population are sociopaths or narcissists. So it is not going to work with a sociopath or a narcissist, right? But outside of that 3%, this is going to work if you come from love. And one thing you said, Marilyn, I love because I think most of us who are training in or practicing spiritual healing, we are recovered rescuers. I know I'm a recovered rescuer. And we just talked about this actually at the Vixen Mastermind, like the, victim, rescuer, or persecutor, making sure you don't fall into these mindsets.
The Cartman
And it's
triangle.
so important. Yes, exactly. That's what we
Yes.
were covering. And so, making sure you don't fall into these categories. And yeah, that was interesting for me too at the beginning of learning to heal. Like, how do I not fall back into being a rescuer again, right? Like, how do I make sure this is coming from a healthy, whole place? And I think self love goes in so much into that. So, along with self love and boundaries, and we'll talk about boundaries more, but I think that being able to receive is so important in both of these concepts, right? So, how would you ladies say you are on receiving? Like, are you good at receiving? Are you bad? Are you a work in progress? Marilyn, I'm going
Receiving
to go
love.
to you first. Just receiving in general, receiving
Okay.
love,
Receiving.
receiving gifts, receiving nice
Okay.
things done for you.
Yes, this is a good question because
Yeah.
the receiving for me, for the longest time was really difficult. Even just to receive a compliment, it was almost like, oh, thank you, or I
Yeah.
don't really deserve it. I don't really, there's a lot of working through, am I worthy? Am I deserving of this? And I would say that I'm much, much better at that now. But that's been the greatest area of, progress of growth that I've had to go through over the years to be able to receive. Yeah, that's a tough one for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially a lot of women, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Sylvia, how would you say you are? Are you good, bad, a work in progress?
I began focusing more on receiving this year because my word for the year was love, and coming from a space of love. And in order to give more, I needed to learn to receive. And it for someone like me who for the longest time didn't understand the concept of self-love, receiving was even more foreign. And so, but what really helped me there was my gratitude journaling practice. And the more I practiced thanking God every day for what I received from Him, that's what really helped me start receiving those moments of joy, those gifts, small gifts I would receive in a day, and start framing and focusing my mind on receiving versus what would be the opposite, giving too much.
Yeah.
But I think all of those concepts are intertwined with each other because self-love is at the center of it. And without that, the receiving and the boundaries don't really work. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Julia, how would you rate yourself?
Well, I think it's something that I was never bad at, but not ever good at. And I've grown to be better, you know, most of my life. And I still feel like this today. Like, for example, at Christmas time, I'm 10 times happier and more fulfilled and joyful giving somebody a something, and in this term, giving them a physical gift, than I am receiving it. Of course, it makes me happy and I appreciate it, but that doesn't bring me the same amount of joy. So, in a way, it almost would make me feel bad to receive things because I wasn't outputting the good energy like I would be to give the gift. But now I think that it's something that I've gotten a lot better at. And I think it's because, again, part of this quarter life crisis and realization and maturing and growth, it's that I feel it feels nice to be appreciated when you're receiving something, whether it's physical affection, physical gifts, words of affirmation, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's kind of that little pick me up that makes you remember, like, okay, maybe I am a little bit badass. Let's keep it moving. Sometimes you need that little extra pick me up from somebody that you love and trust and respect. And so I think I've gotten better about that.
I love it. Actually, you should ask Lisa this. So Julia works with Lisa now, and she was running my team at Roberts Well, and I would leave little chocolates on her desk. Like, I'd sneak in and put chocolates in there if I knew she was having like, it was just like a little gift of love, right?
Yes,
So
and I love that. I love that. The little
it's
things, like even sitting in front of me now, I have a little whiteboard for notes throughout the day, and my husband left me little notes on here. Jules is super smart. You're my soulmate. I love you. While I wasn't in my office. Those little things like that, they really do mean a lot.
It's so great. No, that's awesome. And Steven's amazing. I love her husband. We're very blessed. Both my nieces have amazing husbands. So they
Yes,
became
very
part of the
much
family
so.
very quickly.
Yeah.
But that's so interesting. And thank you all for being so vulnerable because, Jules, in my experience, you're a great receiver. Just teasing. I would have never guessed you felt badly about it.
Yeah, well, also, I feel like everybody will tend to put on a facade of happiness
True.
and confidence and things like that.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's interesting. So I would say I'm a phenomenal receiver. And my ex-significant other would tell you that too. I don't think it was always that way. I mean, for sure, it was definitely, I kind of had a quick aha. Sometimes when you're learning or healing things, some are very quick and some, like, it's like the roller coaster, right? And for some reason, the receiving was very quick for me. And it came in 2020 when I was doing some spiritual work. And it was like understanding because I've always been big on energy and and feeling energy and giving energy and showing up with energy. And I guess how it was explained to me or what I came to realize is if someone's trying to give me something and I don't accept it, it's like me going like this to their energy, like blocking their energy from coming, right? And when I understood that, it was such a strong aha for me that I was fixed immediately. And so I used to do this meditation where I imagined, because this came to me in that session, like I'll close my eyes and I just imagine like these hula hoops of energy going around me, and it's the cycle of giving and receiving. And because I was an overgiver too, and I wasn't great at receiving, especially receiving assistance, receiving help. And sometimes I still struggle with receiving support. That's the one thing I need to work more on. But when I don't know, I just like understood this beautiful, like giving and receiving, like this flow of energy. And it was so impactful for me that from then on, I was like a very joyful receiver. So I would really encourage you, find a way that it makes sense to you and what's important to you, because, just think about last time you tried to give something or do something. It's usually when you're trying to do something for someone, I find. I mean, most people are going to be gracious and accept gifts, right? Even if they feel badly, like Julia shared. But when you try to do something or offer help to someone and they say no, think about it. It doesn't feel good. It's almost like your chest constricts, right? Because they're blocking your energy. So when I understood that, I didn't want to make other people feel that way. So I thought, you know what? If they're offering to give to me, support me, or do something for me, I'm going to joyfully receive. It makes them happy. It makes me happy. And it's a win-win. So,
I love
I hope,
that.
thank you. I hope someone's listening and it helps them, because when you understand this concept, it's just so beautiful. It's like crazy beautiful. So, but again, as we said, a lot of women have a hard time receiving. And I think it's socialization and this attack on the femininity that we've had for a while, right? We're supposed to sacrifice, do everything, go to work, do everything at home, take care of kids, like give to everyone, put ourselves last. And so if you do nothing else, please listen to this and spend that time for yourself, right? Take that time, take care of yourself, give to yourself, love yourself. And it's amazing how things start showing up. Marilyn and I, our teacher, he says all the time, I'm a child of God. I deserve to be in the right place at the right time. I deserve to have a great day every day. When I started saying that every morning, like, I can't find my keys, there they are. Like, it's so crazy. It shows up in every aspect of your life. And I now wake up and just trust every day. Okay, I'm going to receive what I need. And it's like so freeing and allows you to be who you're meant to be and be that purpose you're meant to be. So whatever, your hack is, a friend of mine does human design. And before that, she taught me to say, show me how easy it can be. Like every time I was frustrated. So really just opening yourself up to receive. And as you start receiving, I don't know, those little things like finding my keys reminds me that I'm loved and helps me love myself more.
There's
Marilyn?
definitely that element of surrender in receiving. And I think sometimes that's where we might have a block with receiving if there's some fear there in surrendering. But when you surrender to God, when you surrender or higher power, whatever resonates with you, that is when, yeah, those gifts just start flowing in. You're so right on, April.
I agree. And, it's a catch-22 being a business coach and consultant. I do that along with high performance and spiritual coaching because it is so beneficial to set a defined goal. But sometimes I think when we set a defined goal, we're capping or limiting. So I always set the defined goal and then say, okay, but you can give me whatever you want. like, this is what I'm aiming for. But if more is coming, I am accepting it, right? Like, you want to be careful not to block because unfortunately, setting those precise goals is a little bit more masculine energy, and it helps move your business forward and gives you a clear path. And then you can use your feminine energy and intuition building the plan to get there and solving the problems, right? So, I know we need to wrap up soon. Jules, I would love to hear from you because hopefully we have some younger listeners. I'm sorry for snickering. I just snickered about the quarter life crisis because I had it too. But I don't think in those terms because in Strategic Coach, we actually do this life extender. So in my mind, I'm living to 124. So I always just say in this stage of my life, I don't say this half, this quarter. Like I try to get rid of like all time limitations. So that's why I was snickering. Not because you're young going through a crisis, but I just, it's interesting when you change your mindset, right? I don't think in terms of quarter. I'm sure, Marilyn, you're the same way.
Oh,
so
yes. It is. Yeah. I had the same thought when Julia shared that. I was like, yes, but it's probably not even a quarter. It's just the beginning. Exactly. She's going to live to 150.
Yeah. So I'm going to pave the way to 124 and I'm a generation ahead of you. So just think where you're going.
Perfect.
You'll be good. But Jules, what I'd love to hear from you because, you are starting out in your career, but you have a lot of responsibility. And by the way, could I share the story of when you were an intern at Roberts Wealth?
Sure, yeah.
When you came to me. And I say this because obviously her last name is Roberts. She works at Roberts. So many people think, oh, it's the family business. Of course, your chief marketing officer. And by the way, let's put this in perspective. Your firm spans from Florida to Texas, right? You have about 40 employees, right?
We just hit 50, I believe.
50, yep.
Yes.
And she is in the C-suite. And what I can share with you is my brother is the CEO, and he did not want any of his children working in his business. He wanted them to go make their way, go out in the world, and then come back. And so Julia was an intern in college, and she came to me, and she was very upset. And she was like, I love this. I really want to work there. Dad told me I can't work there. I have to get a job when I go to college. I said, here's what you do. You're the first one to show up because you're the boss's daughter. You outwork everyone, you bring value, you're kind, like you're basically the person they can't live without, and then you're going to have a job. And what happened was my brother's COO and his top advisor came to him and said, we need to hire Julia. And he said, fine, you're hiring her, not me, right? Because he didn't want those weird things. So
he said, she's your employee.
Exactly. So I just want to point out, she 100% earned her way to where she is now. And that's pretty amazing. And she was smart enough to listen to her aunt. So I'm just teasing you. So because I bring that up because you've shared with me, you're close friends with a lot of people you work with. And I know when you're younger, that's tougher. And you've had to learn some lessons about setting boundaries because you are the direct report for a lot of people, right? Like you actually manage a team. So can you share with us, maybe some lessons you've had in setting boundaries?
Yeah, I think it's all about execution. It's all about finding the fine line between what needs to get done and who's your friend. I don't know if y'all know about what the DISC profile is. It's a personality test that people do for sales. And I am a big D, little I, which means D is like a dominance, and then I is influencer. And it's funny because I have internal struggles. The D in me is very like, all right, get to the point. Let's get this done. No excuses. I don't need explanation. What's the solution? But the I in me is also a little bit more of the people pleaser, the more of the, yeah, let's talk it out, So I have that internal battle. And it's sometimes I'll sit there and I'll feel on the inside like I'm just building up, because the D in me wants to just say, look, let's get to the point. Let's do what we got to do. How can we fix this? But the I in me is sitting there with their mouth shut, nodding along. So it comes to the point of being able to do it timing wise, doing it in a respectful manner. Your tone and your body language speaks 10 times louder than the words that come out of your mouth. As humans, we can say anything we want, but our tone and our body language is what executes what we're feeling. And I think that being able to prioritize your time in the workplace of, we can eat lunch, we could talk, we can catch up, we can do whatever, and then being able to say, okay, I've got to get to work, yesterday I literally put a sticky note on my door that said, leave me alone. Let me know if the house is on fire. Because we had lunch and we were having a good time, and I was like, all right, I've got to focus. I've got to do what I need to do. I have been burned in the past of not setting that boundary, and it was a horrible thing, but such a great thing to happen to me, because I've been trying to learn the fine line of, like, at the end of the day, you are my friend. I love and I respect you, but my priority is this company, getting what needs to be done, and doing that in the most respectful, loving way I can.
Of that. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's awesome. So Sylvia and Marilyn, any last thoughts on boundaries?
I do have a last thought to share.
Please.
Something that, it's helped me, think about or just practice boundaries in every moment. It just helps me stay present, is to tap into my intuition, right? That using that gift that we all have, to discern in that moment, in that present moment, is this good for me? Is this not good for me? Anything from, is what am I going to eat, or going in this direction, or, it just we all have that, it's a barometer, it's our divine guidance. So using that and practicing that has been really, really helpful for me, because when you're using that, you're growing in your self-trust. Yeah. And when you have that, it just gives you more confidence. And you just know that when you tune into that, the choices you're making, even the small ones, are aligned with your soul purpose, your higher purpose, with God, with your higher power. And to me, that is the ultimate boundary setter for me.
I love that. Thank you, Marilyn. I actually, the other week, I had a guy friend of mine who was giving me unsolicited advice, right? And I was like listening. We just gone to the Astor games. He's chatting with me. He was like, April, you have to think about these things. And I was like, actually, that's not how I operate. Like, he couldn't. I was like, nope, I pretty much listen to my intuition and God. And like, that's how I make my decisions. And like, it was like, he was like, I'm going to have to get back to you on this. Like, he didn't know how to respond to me, but it's so funny because I too operate that way, and it becomes so natural to us that we forget that other people don't operate this way, right? And so you get into these moments where it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go do this. And the interesting thing about the intuition is sometimes that makes no sense. Like I'll ask again and then I like check in and make sure it's coming from the right source. And then I think it and I follow it and it always leads you in the right direction. So that's why we have to start, getting out of here, getting into our heart. But that's a whole nother conversation. So Sylvia, how about you? What do you think about boundaries or what thoughts would you like to share?
Last minute thoughts from me come very much in alignment with what Marilyn and you were speaking on, in terms of there is an inner wisdom inside all of us. And in what I believe in is that God resides in me, and he is constantly guiding me and waiting for me to ask him for that guidance, of which I do every single morning. And the more I do it daily, the more I know the direction that my soul wants to take me in. Because for
Yeah.
years, I blocked myself with the thoughts that would come to my mind based from a fear space. And now that
Yeah.
I'm in a loving space, it's easier somehow. It's not as hard as it once used to be. When I was younger, I had to overthink things, and it stressed me out so much. And now it just comes so naturally that even I ask myself, is this in alignment with what I really desire? And if right away I get the feeling in my heart space when God is present and answering, if he's there and answers, then I know the direction I'm meant to go in. And it doesn't require me to overthink or stress or any of
Yep.
that, which is awesome because it's not meant to be difficult. We're the ones that make it difficult through
We block
unresolved
it.
trauma or blocks that we have, things that we have not worked through.
Yeah.
And whatever's inside of us is blocking us from receiving that guidance and the gift of setting those boundaries for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And, gratitude is key. I think Marilyn touched on this and you did. When that comes, being grateful so it continues. And it's very much like the giving and receiving I shared. And the other thing I like to point out is when it's your intuition or God, it's clear. Like if there's confusion, it is not your intuition, right? Like it is not the path you're supposed to take. So sometimes we have to be patient until that clarity comes, which takes a little bit. But yeah, there have been decisions that I was just like, this is a hard no. And I couldn't tell you why it was. And then later it came up why it was. Now I don't care. I just go with it. I'm not even curious anymore. I'm just like, okay, this is a no for me. Moving on. This is a yes. And so it's so freeing when you can get to that place and trust yourself and be grateful for it. So, Julia, any last parting advice on self love or boundaries? And I know we have to hop soon.
Yeah, so I feel like, and y'all of all of your stories have really coincided with what I'm going to say is that self-love and boundaries are very linked.
Yeah.
We the more self-love we have, the more confidence, then the more comfortable we feel in what boundary we're setting and why. We believe in the value we have and respect ourselves and love the other person. And so we feel more validated in setting those boundaries. And I think another thing that I struggle with is, as she had mentioned earlier, the story of when I first started here versus to now. I'm a Roberts. I'm also 24 years old and doing well for myself. And I think that can almost hurt my confidence. You would think it would do the opposite. You would think that it's like, wow, you're doing great. You should feel so good. I have a fear of not being respected because of my age, not being respected because I'm a Roberts. And that's something that I've had to overcome. And that's kind of affected, me being able to set those solidified boundaries with people that I work with. I don't feel as confident to do it because everybody is older than me and has more experience than me. But the more self-love that I'm gaining and the more that I really recognize what I do and how capable I am, the easier that setting boundaries is getting, because I'm feeling more validated in it. I'm feeling like this is for you and it's for me.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I feel like when you say boundaries, people think it's a selfish thing. It's not. It's setting boundaries not just for me and what I need. I'm also doing it for you because I love and respect you, and I love and respect our relationship. So boundaries are beneficial both ways, although not always received that way.
No, I agree. Boundaries are usually to protect something, your core values, goals of the company, like they're, your family, your time, your energy, you're protecting something, right? And exactly, it's an act of keeping this person in your life instead of like pushing them out. So
Right.
I love that. It's super smart. And you and I can talk separately about this, but I think getting into the concept of dignity will help you. And Sylvia and I, we just talked about this at the mastermind last weekend, but spiritually, men need respect and women need dignity. And this was another aha I just suddenly got this summer. And when I started standing in my dignity, it's amazing how people act around you. Like they give you your dignity and they even apologize for their behavior. And, you're doing it in a very graceful way. But I think like a concept, dignity for women is so important. I've been talking about it to all my friends and my clients and stuff. And it's like fire catching wind. So we'll have to have another conversation on that because I'd like to honor your time. And let's end with something fun. I love, Sylvia's been on before, but Marilyn and Julia, you have not, but Sylvia, jump in here. I always like to hear when you feel you're most feminine, number one. And number two, what color would you paint your femininity? And I've heard everything from black to teal blue to light pink. So there's no wrong. The concept is that we as women are collectively beautiful. So what does your femininity look like? So I'm going to start with Marilyn on this one.
All right. Well, the color is actually the color I'm wearing now, kind of like a deep rose, sort of any shade of deeper magenta rose color.
I love it.
I love that. It's my middle name as well, so I seem to gravitate towards that. And gosh, there was a win you wanted me to share, or
Nope, just that,
or
a color. Yeah, maybe just like
color.
when do you feel you're most feminine? Like, some people when they're
Okay.
mothering, some people when they're dancing, when they're dressed. Like, when do you feel like you're flowing in your femininity?
For me, it's when I'm in nature and working with
Yeah.
nature. So my plants and of course my cats, when I'm, cooking, I love to cook and just, in that act of creation and being tangible with anything that's nourishing is when
love
I
it.
feel the most feminine.
So, what's your implementer score on Colby?
I'm a 4.
Oh, I'm a 4 too. Okay. I like to cook, but we'll have this conversation offline. I thought it might be higher. Interesting. So it's truly the nature. Awesome. Sylvia, how about you? And by the way, you all look beautiful in pink today. I am in navy blue, so I'm bringing the masculine energy to this podcast. Anyway, Sylvia, how about
I
you?
know in a previous interview I mentioned yellow and mothering, but today
Yeah.
for some reason that's not resonating with me. Has what I have found when I'm most feminine is when I'm with my girlfriends, fellow collaborators and girlfriends, and we're having dinner out or even just recently lunch out. And today the color like hot pink is really resonating with me as being very, very feminine, very bold, sassy, but just confident in being a woman and thinking like a woman and reacting like a woman. I mean, all of it is what is coming to me today. So that's what I've been prompted to share.
I love it.
I
Thank
I
you.
love that, and I can agree with that, which is I specifically chose my pink blazer today. Um, I would have to, I agreed with everything Sylvia said of like sometimes, and it's specifically this blazer, it's just the pink confidence, but sassy, feminine. I just love it. But I would say when I think myself, I think like bright yellow. Like because as corny as it may sound, I will be in bed and I will find myself just laying there smiling about other people's happiness, or like what you see on the TV show, things like that. So I feel like I'm smiling all the time, even just sitting here, even if we weren't having such a great conversation, I'll just sit here and smile. And there's usually not a reason why. But when I feel the most like feminine energy would probably be anytime that I'm leading. When I'm leading something, I have a certain amount of confidence, and I feel like I'm helping other people, and I feel like that's where I thrive. That's where I feel the most like I can accomplish anything. Because a lot of times you could ask me to lead on something I have no idea about, and I'll probably do a killer job at it because it's the fact of being in a leadership position and influencing other people is where I thrive. So I think that's where I feel the most feminine energy.
I like it. You're glowing as you share. So my color is close to Marilyn's, and I actually, today it's coming to me that I feel most feminine when I'm coaching or healing. I really love those moments. And the other thing is I'm kind of old school. I like it when I'm with a significant other who takes care of me. Like I feel very feminine when I'm on a date. They're opening the door, they're taking care of me, and I like that energy. I know it's very controversial today, but I like being taken care of, so I enjoy that. I told you I'm a good receiver. Awesome. Marilyn, I'm glad to hear it. All right, ladies, I know we ran a long time today. We could talk for hours. Thank you so much for your time. This has been like such an amazing, heart-touching conversation. As I said, self-love is my favorite concept in Vixen, so thank you for making today magical and special. I just want to remind everyone listening, I always like to say the world needs more love. How are you going to show up in love today? And specifically, how are you going to love on yourself? What's that one little thing you can do just to show yourself how special you are, how much you love yourself? And I really want to challenge you. How do you become your own biggest cheerleader? So again, thanks for listening to us today. Thanks to all of our amazing, beautiful guests. By the way, I'm sure you want more of them just like I do. So you can check out the resources page on the Vixen Gathering. You can get all of their information to follow them on social media, check out their offerings, what they do, connect with them. I highly encourage. And if you loved this episode today as much as I did, please let us know. You can tell us on Apple or Spotify. Let us know what you loved about our conversation today. And don't forget, subscribe at vixengathering.com. You can subscribe and we will send you all of these fun resources from every single episode. You don't even have to go looking for them. So I look forward to talking to you soon. Go out, find a way to love yourself today. And again, thank you to all of our beautiful guests. Have an amazing day. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.